On the third night of what she called an extended business trip, Ethan Cross stood alone in the dark kitchen, rereading the same message until the words began to blur. Meetings ran late. Don't wait up. It sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Then his phone vibrated again. Not from her, but from a casual notification he almost ignored. A photo, a smiling face, and beneath it, a location tag that didn't belong to any conference hall, any office district, or any city she claimed to be in. It pointed to a quiet marina resort hours away. Candlelight, wine glasses, and a man's hand resting where it shouldn't. In that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying. If this was a lie, then his marriage wasn't just cracking, it had been carefully rewritten behind his back. And this was only the beginning. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. And if you're drawn to stories of secrets, betrayal, and truth coming to light, don't forget to subscribe. Ethan Cross didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling as the glow from his phone faded and returned again and again, like a pulse he couldn't slow. He replayed the image in his mind, the way the light hit the table, the relaxed curve of her smile, the intimacy of a moment that didn't look staged or accidental. It looked practiced, lived in, the kind of comfort that only grows in the absence of guilt. By morning, he told himself he was overreacting. That was his talent, really finding reasons to doubt his own instincts. He showered, dressed, made coffee he barely touched. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Lena's favorite mug sat untouched by the sink, a faint lipstick mark still visible on the rim. She'd left it there the morning she packed, rushing out with a quick kiss and a promise to bring something back from the airport shop. At least, he had smiled then. He always smiled then. At work, Ethan tried to focus, but every email blurred into the same gray noise. Numbers lost meaning. Conversations slipped past him. He checked his phone more times than he could count. Not for messages from Lena, he already knew there wouldn't be any, but for something that would prove the photo wrong. A follow-up post. A correction. A laughable explanation. Nothing came. By noon, the location tag had been deleted. That should have relieved him. Instead, it tightened something deep in his chest. People didn't delete things unless they knew they shouldn't have posted them in the first place. He searched the resort online, scrolling through photos that matched the lighting, the tableware, the view behind her shoulder. Each match felt like a quiet confirmation, whispered rather than spoken. He noticed how often the word romantic appeared in the reviews. Ethan closed the browser and leaned back in his chair, forcing himself to breathe. He remembered the early years of their marriage, the way Lena used to text him mid-meeting just to complain about bad coffee, the way she insisted on calling every night when she traveled, even if it meant whispering from a hotel bathroom. Somewhere along the way, those calls had turned into brief check-ins, then into apologies for missed calls, then into nothing at all. He told himself people changed, careers demanded things, love adapted. That was what mature couples did, right? They adjusted. They didn't interrogate each other over a single photo. But this wasn't just a photo anymore. It was the way she hadn't answered his call last night, the way her text arrived almost instantly afterward, like it had been prepared in advance, the way she hadn't asked a single question about his day. That evening, Ethan drove home slowly, taking the long route as if delaying the moment he'd be alone with his thoughts might soften them. The house greeted him with the same silence. He ate dinner, standing up, scrolling again, deeper this time. He found the account that had posted the photo, a woman named Mara Quinn. The name rang faintly familiar. Lena had mentioned her once or twice, always casually, always without detail. Just someone from work, she'd said. Ethan clicked through Mara's profile. Too many photos, too much access, too many moments that looked private for someone who was just a colleague. He hesitated before sending a message. His fingers hovered, then pulled back. What would he even say? Hi. I think my wife might be lying to me. Could you confirm? The thought made his stomach turn. He closed the app and tossed the phone onto the couch, where it landed face down like it was ashamed. Night fell again, heavier than the last. Ethan poured himself a drink he didn't finish and sat by the window, watching headlights pass like brief lives intersecting and disappearing. Somewhere out there, Lena was laughing, or talking, or touching someone else's hand. The not knowing was worse than certainty. It left room for hope, and hope was starting to feel cruel. Just before midnight, his phone buzzed. A message from Lena. "Sorry, today was insane. Back-to-back meetings. I'm exhausted." No mention of where she was. No photo. No call. Ethan typed and erased 3 different replies before settling on something neutral. "Hope you're okay. Get some rest." The message sent, and with it went something else. A quiet decision he didn't fully acknowledge yet. He couldn't keep living inside unanswered questions. Love, he realized, wasn't supposed to feel like surveillance. Trust wasn't supposed to require this much effort. He opened his laptop again, not to search the resort this time, but to check their shared calendar. Her trip was still listed under a different city. He checked the conference website she'd mentioned. The schedule ended yesterday. No extension, no late meetings. Ethan closed his eyes, the weight of it finally settling in. If she was lying, then she had been lying carefully, methodically, and if she was telling the truth, then too many pieces of reality were conspiring against her. Outside, the night pressed in, thick and watchful. Somewhere between doubt and resolve, Ethan understood that whatever waited ahead, whatever he was about to uncover, would change him. This wasn't just about catching a lie. It was about reclaiming a version of himself that had been slowly fading in the shadow of someone else's secrets. And whether he was ready or not, the story had already begun to move without his permission. Morning came without relief. Ethan woke to a dull ache behind his eyes, the kind that came from a night spent half awake, half drowning in thoughts he couldn't outrun. Sunlight crept through the blinds, landing on the empty side of the bed where Lena usually slept. Her pillow still holding the faint shape of her head, he sat there longer than necessary, staring at it as if expecting it to accuse him of something he hadn't done yet. Their marriage, from the outside, looked enviable. Friends used words like stable and solid when they talked about Ethan and Lena. They owned a modest but tasteful house in a quiet neighborhood. They hosted dinners. They smiled in photos. Ethan had always believed that meant something. That consistency was proof of love. He'd built his life around being dependable, showing up on time, paying bills early, trusting the person he chose to trust. Lena had been different from him from the start, sharper, faster, always reaching for the next rung before she was asked to climb. He admired that about her. When her career began to take off, when promotions came with longer hours and frequent travel, he told himself this was the price of ambition. He supported her publicly, defended her privately, swallowed the small loneliness that crept in during her absences. But the absences had changed. At first, she used to call from airports, her voice echoing as she complained about delays. Then, it became quick calls from hotel rooms, the TV murmuring in the background. Lately, there were excuses instead of calls. Too tired, early meeting, bad signal. Ethan accepted them all, because questioning felt like mistrust, and mistrust felt like failure. He went through the motions of his day, like an actor who knew his lines, but had forgotten why the play mattered. At work, he caught himself watching couples across the street during lunch, wondering how many of them were pretending too. How many of them were one location tag away from collapse. By afternoon, a strange calm settled over him. Not peace, something colder, the kind that arrives when denial finally exhausts itself. He opened his phone again, this time deliberately, and scrolled back through Lena's recent messages. He noticed patterns he hadn't wanted to see before. The way she avoided specifics, the way she mirrored his words instead of offering her own, the way affection had been replaced with efficiency. He remembered something she'd said just before leaving on this trip, spoken lightly while zipping her suitcase. "If I don't answer right away, don't read into it, okay?" At the time, He'd laughed and told her not to worry. Now, the memory felt rehearsed, like a line delivered to prepare the audience for what came next. Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from his sister, Claire, asking if Lena was back yet. Ethan stared at the screen, unsure how to answer. He typed, "Not yet," then erased it. Typed it again, sent it. Almost immediately, the 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Claire didn't push. She never did. That evening, Ethan cooked dinner out of habit. Setting 2 plates before realizing what he'd done, he slid one back into the cabinet and ate slowly, tasting very little. The house felt different now, not empty, but dishonest, like it was hiding something in plain sight. He sat on the couch afterward, phone in hand, scrolling through old photos of them. There was one from years ago, taken at a cheap beach motel during a spontaneous weekend trip. Lena was laughing, hair wild from the wind, one arm wrapped around his neck. He studied her face, searching for signs of the woman he thought he knew. He wondered when that version of her had last existed, or if she ever truly had. The thought unsettled him more than the idea of infidelity itself. Later that night, unable to sit still, Ethan opened his laptop and logged into their shared cloud storage. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for. Maybe reassurance? Maybe proof? He found mundane things at first: old tax documents, photos of receipts, scanned IDs. Then he noticed a folder he didn't recognize. It wasn't locked, just overlooked. Inside were travel itineraries that didn't match the ones Lena had shown him. Hotels booked under slightly different dates, cities swapped, names he didn't recognize, attached to meeting notes. His heart began to pound, slow and heavy, like something waking up. He closed the folder without opening anything else, suddenly aware of how far he was crossing into territory he'd always avoided. This wasn't who he thought he was. He prided himself on trust, on respect. Yet here he was, uncovering pieces of a life that seemed to run parallel to his own, close enough to touch but never intersecting. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his temples. He didn't feel angry yet. Anger required certainty. What he felt instead was grief, quiet and premature, like mourning someone who was still alive but already gone. His phone buzzed once more. A new message from Lena. "Trip might get extended again. I'll explain when I'm home." That was it. No apology, no concern, no question about how he felt. Ethan stared at the message, then placed the phone face down on the table. In that moment, something shifted, not dramatically, not with resolve or rage, just a subtle realignment of awareness. He understood now that whatever Lena was doing, it wasn't happening to him by accident. It was happening without him, by design. And if the truth was being kept from him on purpose, then finding it was no longer betrayal. It was survival. Ethan didn't reply to Lena's last message. He left it unread, not as a punishment, but as a pause, his first intentional silence in a marriage where he had always rushed to fill every gap. The quiet felt dangerous, like stepping onto ice without knowing how thick it was, but it also felt honest. The next morning, he woke early and sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, the house still wrapped in sleep. He told himself he would only check one thing, just one. He logged into the airline account they shared for family trips, the one he'd set up years ago to collect miles. His hands were steady, but his chest wasn't. He scanned recent activity. There it was, a booking from 3 days ago. Not the city Lena claimed, not even the same state. The return date was open-ended. Ethan exhaled slowly. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. He opened the conference website Lena had mentioned weeks ago, scrolling through the schedule again. This time with sharper eyes. The event had ended. The keynote speaker list didn't include her company. He checked attendee photos, sponsor logos, press releases. Nothing. If Lena had been there, she'd been invisible by design. At work, Ethan moved like a ghost. He answered questions automatically, nodded in meetings, smiled when expected. Inside, he was building a timeline. When she said she arrived, when she said meetings ran late, when the photo appeared, when it disappeared, he realized the deletion happened just minutes after he'd viewed the post. A coincidence? Maybe, or maybe not. During lunch, he finally did what he'd been avoiding. He searched Mara Quinn's name properly this time. Not just social media public records, professional profiles, tagged mentions. Mara worked in the same industry as Lena, but not at the same company. Their paths crossed at conferences, mixers, retreats, the kind of events that blurred professional lines under soft lighting and open bars. One photo stopped him cold. It was older, taken at another resort months ago. Lena was in it too, half turned toward the camera. Drink in hand, the caption joked about escaping the grind. Ethan checked the date. Lena had been visiting a client that week. His throat tightened. He closed the tab, suddenly aware of how quiet the office around him had become. The world hadn't changed, only his understanding of it had. That evening, Ethan drove home with a sense of purpose that surprised him. Not anger, not revenge, curiosity, sharpened by necessity. He stopped at the grocery store, bought things he didn't need, anything to delay the moment he'd be alone again. When he finally pulled into the driveway, he sat in the car for a long minute, watching the porch light flicker on automatically. Inside, he went straight to the study. Lena rarely used it. He opened drawers he'd never opened before, flipped through folders he'd never touched. Most of it was ordinary warranties, manuals, old notebooks. Then he found a slim envelope tucked inside a box of cables. Inside were printed emails, travel confirmations, a handwritten note in Lena's neat, slanted script. He didn't read it all. He didn't need to. The names were enough. The dates were enough. Ethan felt something give way then. Not break, settle, like a verdict being read aloud. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Lena. It was an unknown number. He let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail. A woman's voice, cautious but firm, introduced herself as someone who had worked with Lena recently and thought Ethan deserved clarity. No details, just that, and a request to call back. He replayed the message twice, weighing the risk. Whoever this was, they knew his number. They knew his name. They knew enough to reach out. Ethan didn't call back immediately. Instead, he saved the number and sat back, staring at the ceiling, letting the implications circle him like birds waiting to land. Later that night, he checked Lena's location again, not through her phone, but through something subtler, a shared app they'd installed years ago and forgotten about, one that logged activity quietly in the background. The dot appeared on the map, steady and unmistakable. The same marina, the same place as the photo. Ethan closed his eyes. There it was, confirmation without confrontation, truth without permission. He imagined calling her, demanding answers, hearing the excuses line up, polished and practiced. He imagined her crying, or worse, sounding relieved. The thought made his stomach turn. He wasn't ready for that yet. He needed to understand the shape of the lie before stepping into it. Instead, he opened a blank document and began to write dates, times, names, locations, screenshots saved carefully, labeled and backed up. He felt detached, like he was documenting someone else's life. But with each entry, the fog lifted a little. The story was forming, whether he wanted it to or not. Near midnight, Lena finally called. Ethan watched the phone vibrate on the table, her name flashing like a test he hadn't studied for. He let it ring. When it stopped, a text followed almost immediately. "Why aren't you answering?" Ethan typed, then erased. Typed again. Finally, he sent a single sentence. "Where are you? Really?" The reply didn't come right away. When it did, it avoided the question entirely. Ethan stared at the screen, a sad understanding settling over him. She wasn't going to tell the truth. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Which meant, if he wanted answers, he'd have to find them himself. and he was no longer afraid to look. Ethan didn't respond to Lena's deflection. He set the phone down gently, as if sudden movement might shatter whatever fragile control he had left, and stood by the window. Outside, the street lamp cast a pale circle on the pavement, illuminating nothing of consequence. He realized then how little answers came from staring outward. If he wanted the truth, he'd have to move toward it. The unknown voicemail played again in his head. "You deserve clarity." The phrase felt rehearsed, careful, not the language of a friend, but not the language of an enemy either. Ethan waited until morning to call back, letting the night settle his nerves into something steadier. When he finally dialed, the woman answered on the second ring. Her name was Mara Quinn. She spoke softly, with the confidence of someone used to being believed. She said she worked adjacent to Lena's field, that they'd cross paths at retreats and off-site meetings. She said she'd noticed things that didn't sit right, that she felt guilty watching someone be misled. Ethan listened, saying very little, absorbing the cadence of her voice, the pauses she chose carefully. When he asked why she'd reached out now, Mara said, "Because I thought you should know before it went any further." "What is it?" Ethan asked. There was a beat, something that started as business and stopped being just business a long time ago. Ethan thanked her and ended the call before his voice could betray him. He didn't trust Mara. He knew that instinctively, but he didn't dismiss her either. People didn't insert themselves into situations like this without reason. Guilt was one possibility, self-interest was another. He spent the rest of the morning digging into details he'd once ignored. Bank statements, shared subscriptions, travel points. The deeper he went, the clearer the pattern became. Lena's trips overlapped with the same small set of dates and locations. The marina resort wasn't an outlier. It was a hub. At lunch, Ethan drove past the house instead of going inside. Parking down the street, where he could think without walls pressing in, he called his sister, Claire, and told her a version of the truth that was small enough to carry. That he thought Lena might be lying. That things didn't add up. Claire didn't interrupt. When he finished, she asked a single question. "Do you want to know, or do you want it to stop hurting?" Ethan closed his eyes. "I want to know." That afternoon, he did something that surprised even himself. He took a personal day and drove toward the marina. The resort was quieter than he expected. Not empty, but curated music low, staff attentive, privacy emphasized. He parked farther away and walked the last stretch, blending into the background. He wasn't sure what he hoped to see. Proof, closure, some version of Lena that would make sense of the past few years. He saw her near the water, sunglasses on, posture relaxed in a way she never was at home. She was talking to a man Ethan recognized immediately from photos he'd found online. Grant, hale, older, polished. The kind of man who filled a room without raising his voice. They stood close, bodies angled toward each other. The conversation intimate enough to exclude the world. Ethan stayed where he was, heart hammering. He watched Grant gesture toward the water, watched Lena laugh and touch his arm. Not accidentally, not briefly. The touch lingered, natural and unguarded. No urgency, no fear of being seen. That was when Ethan understood the full weight of the betrayal. This wasn't a secret affair hiding in shadows. This was a parallel life, lived openly in places she believed he'd never enter. He took photos. Not many. Enough. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed. A text from Mara. "Did you go looking for her?" The timing made his skin crawl. He didn't reply. Back in his car, Ethan sat with the engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Anger finally surfaced, not explosive, but sharp and focused. Anger at the deception, at the careful way his trust had been used to fund someone else's freedom, at himself for confusing patience with loyalty. On the drive home, he received another message from Lena. "Why are you being distant?" No apology, no concern, just annoyance. Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he made a list, not of accusations, but of facts, dates, locations, financial overlaps. names. He saved copies in places she couldn't access, backed them up twice. He wasn't planning a confrontation yet. He was planning to protect himself. That night, he dreamed of water rising slowly, filling rooms without warning. When he woke, the dream clung to him, damp and unsettling. He checked his phone, no messages. The silence felt deliberate now, like a test she expected him to fail by reaching out. He didn't. Ethan spent the day speaking with a lawyer, recommended quietly through Claire. The conversation was calm, procedural, hypothetical questions answered with professional neutrality. When Ethan mentioned the resort, the lawyer's tone changed subtly. "If there's money involved," he said, "you should assume there's strategy." The word stuck. Strategy implied intent, planning, an endgame. That evening, Ethan returned home to find the porch light on again. As if nothing had changed, he stood there for a moment, keys in hand, feeling the strange clarity that comes when denial finally loosens its grip. He didn't know exactly what Lena was planning. He didn't know how deep Grant Hale's involvement went. But he knew this: the story he'd been living was incomplete by design, and Ethan Cross was done being the last person to read the truth about his own life. Ethan woke before dawn with the decision already made. It didn't arrive as a surge of courage or a grand declaration, but as a quiet certainty that settled into his bones. If Lena could live a parallel life in daylight, then he could stop pretending in the dark. He showered, dressed, and packed a small bag with the essentials: documents, chargers, a change of clothes moving through the house, like a guest preparing to leave early. Before closing the door, he glanced once more at the study, at the places where her secrets had brushed past his life without touching it. Then he locked up and drove. The road toward the marina was pale and empty, the sky bruised with early light. He kept the radio off, letting the hum of tires fill the car, counting exits and breaths. As the city thinned into long stretches of asphalt, memories crept in uninvited. The night they'd first talked about children, the way Lena used to rest her head on his shoulder during long drives, the promise she'd made: "We'll always tell each other the truth, even when it's ugly." He wondered if she remembered saying it. He wondered if she'd meant it at the time. He arrived just after breakfast hours, blending in among the early checkouts and late sleepers. The marina glittered like a postcard, sailboats nodding gently, water catching the sun in neat shards. Ethan parked farther away and walked, keeping his posture neutral, his eyes observant. He didn't go straight to the lobby. He circled, he watched, he listened. Lena emerged from a side path near the docks, sunglasses perched on her head, hair loose in a way she never wore it at home. She wasn't alone. Grant Hale walked beside her, close enough that their arms brushed with every step. They stopped near the railing, the water a soft blue behind them. Grant leaned in to say something. Lena laughed, unguarded, and the sound reached Ethan like a slap. Not because it was loud, but because it was easy. The laugh of someone who didn't fear consequences. Ethan stood still, heart pounding, as a staff member approached them with a tablet. "Your table is ready," the staffer said, smiling. "Right this way, Mr. and Mrs." The rest was lost to the wind. Neither Lena nor Grant corrected the title. They followed without hesitation. That was the moment the last excuse collapsed. Ethan raised his phone and took a few photos, not of them kissing, not of anything dramatic, but of the ordinariness of it all. The ease, the familiarity, evidence of a life that had room for comfort because it was meant to last. He didn't linger. He turned and walked away before his legs betrayed him. Back in the car, he sat with the engine off, hands trembling now that the waiting was over. The betrayal was no longer theoretical. It had weight and color and sound. He started the car and drove until the marina disappeared in the mirror, replaced by long stretches of road and a horizon that didn't promise answers. Halfway home, his phone buzzed. A message from Mara Quinn. "You saw them, didn't you?" The words felt invasive, like a hand on his shoulder he hadn't invited. He didn't reply. He blocked the number instead. Whatever role Mara was playing, Ethan didn't intend to let her write his reactions. He pulled into a quiet cafe off the highway, and ordered coffee he didn't drink. He opened his laptop and reviewed what he had. Photos, confirmations, bank anomalies, itinerary mismatches. He organized everything into folders, labeling them carefully. This wasn't revenge. It was preparation. The lawyer's voice echoed in his mind. Assume their strategy. If Lena and Grant were planning something, Ethan needed to be steps ahead. Not scrambling behind. His phone lit up again. Lena this time. A call. He watched it ring. His name reflected back at him on the dark screen. He let it go to voicemail. When the notification arrived, he didn't listen. Not yet. He drove home as the afternoon stretched thin, feeling a strange split inside himself. One part was grieving, cataloging every small betrayal that led here. The other part was alert, almost calm, mapping next moves. When he arrived, the house felt different, less like a refuge, more like a set. He went straight to the study and began pulling files, scanning documents, photographing pages. He found a folder he'd missed before, tucked behind manuals. Inside were drafts agreements, with comments in the margins, names he didn't recognize, phrases circled and underlined. One phrase repeated often enough to chill him. Timing is critical. Ethan sat back, pulse steadying into something resolute. This wasn't just an affair. It was coordinated, financial, legal. He thought of the recent requests. Lena had made updates, signatures, routine changes. He remembered signing without reading, trusting without checking. The realization burned, but it also clarified the path ahead. As night fell, he made a list of people to contact. The lawyer again, a financial advisor, someone to help him change passwords, secure accounts. He didn't confront Lena. He didn't accuse. He didn't plead. He prepared. Near midnight, Lena finally texted, "Why won't you answer me? I'm worried." The words felt hollow now, shaped to provoke a response. Ethan typed slowly, choosing each word as if it mattered because it did. "We'll talk when you're home." He sent it and set the phone down. For the first time in days, he slept fitfully, but deeply dreaming, not of water rising, but of doors opening onto rooms he hadn't known existed. When he woke, the decision had hardened into resolve. He would not expose himself to half-truths or emotional theatrics. He would gather what he needed, protect what was his, and let the truth meet Lena on terms she didn't control. The story she'd been telling without him was about to collide with the one he was ready to write. Ethan woke to the sound of rain tapping against the windows, steady and relentless. It matched the rhythm in his chest, no longer frantic, just firm. He checked his phone. No new messages from Lena. The silence felt calculated, like she was waiting for him to crack first. He didn't. He spent the morning moving money quietly, not draining accounts, nothing dramatic, but setting limits, adding alerts, opening a separate account in his own name. He changed passwords, enabled extra verification, and photographed every confirmation screen. Each small action felt like reclaiming a square inch of ground. He hated that it had come to this. Hated the part of himself that had learned these steps out of necessity. But he hated the alternative more. By noon, the rain had thinned into mist. Ethan drove to meet Daniel Shore in a modest office tucked between a bakery and a tax firm. Daniel listened without interruption as Ethan laid out the timeline, the photos, the documents. When Ethan mentioned the phrase "timing is critical," Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't impulsive," Daniel said. "It's structured. And when structure shows up in personal relationships, it usually points to leverage." "Leverage for what?" Ethan asked. Daniel leaned back. "Assets, control, an exit that favors one side heavily." Ethan nodded. He'd felt it, that sense of being positioned rather than loved. Daniel advised restraint, documentation, patience. "Let them believe you're still in the dark," he said. "People make mistakes when they think they're winning." On the way home, Ethan's phone buzzed again. A text from Lena, softer this time. "I don't know what's wrong, but I feel like you're pulling away." He read it twice, then put the phone down without answering. The words were almost convincing almost. But the omission was loud. She still hadn't said where she was. She still hadn't told the truth. That afternoon, Ethan met Rena Voss at a quiet cafe near the river. She was precise, observant, the kind of person who noticed details others dismissed. She reviewed the photos and files quickly, then asked questions that cut to the bone. Who booked the trips? Who initiated the account changes? Who stood to gain the most if Ethan were painted as unreliable or at fault? Rena explained her process, what was legal, what was risky, what required patience. We don't chase drama, she said. We chase patterns. Patterns tell the story people don't want told. Ethan agreed to proceed. It felt strange to outsource pieces of his private life, but the alternative was isolation. He needed allies who could see clearly when his own emotions threatened to blur the edges. That evening, Lena called again. Ethan answered this time, keeping his voice even. "Where are you?" he asked. There was a pause just long enough to register. "Still away," she said. "I told you. Things got complicated." "Which city?" Ethan pressed. Another pause. Longer. "Why does that matter?" "Because I asked," he said simply. She sighed, irritation slipping through the practiced calm. "I don't want to fight. Not like this." "I don't want to fight either," Ethan said. "I want the truth." Silence. Then, "We'll talk when I'm back." The call ended. Ethan stared at the phone, feeling the weight of finality settle. The script was set. She would return with explanations polished and ready. He would be expected to receive them gratefully. Rena's update arrived late that night. Grant Hale had a history, quiet settlements, non-disclosure agreements, companies that changed names after disputes, nothing that screamed guilt on its own, everything that whispered risk. And Lena's recent professional moves intersected with his ventures, too neatly to be coincidence. Ethan slept lightly, waking once from a dream where doors kept closing just as he reached them. When morning came, he felt steadier. He went for a run, letting the cool air burn his lungs, grounding himself in motion. He reminded himself that clarity didn't require cruelty. He could be firm without being vicious. Near midday, Lena texted, "I'll be home tonight." Ethan replied with a single word, "Okay." He spent the afternoon preparing, not rehearsing speeches, but arranging the house to feel neutral. He placed documents in folders, not to present yet, but to have within reach. He set his phone to record calls automatically. Within legal bounds, he brewed coffee. He didn't drink. Lena arrived just after dark. She stepped inside with a practiced smile that faltered when she saw his expression calm, unreadable. She set her bag down, reached for him, then hesitated when he didn't move. "You look tired," she said. "So do you," Ethan replied. They sat at the table. The space between them felt measured, intentional. Lena began with apologies that didn't name offenses. Stress, pressure, misunderstandings. Ethan listened without interrupting. Watching for tells the shift in posture, the glance away when she skirted specifics. When she finished, he asked, "Why did a hotel staff member call you Mrs. Hale?" Her eyes widened. "Just a fraction." "What?" "At the marina," he said. "Why didn't you correct them?" Color rose in her cheeks. "You were there." "Yes." The word landed heavy. Lena straightened, defenses snapping into place. "You followed me. I went to find the truth," Ethan said. "Because you wouldn't bring it home." She opened her mouth, then closed it. For a moment, something like fear flickered across her face. Then, it hardened into resolve. "It's not what you think," she said. Ethan met her gaze. "Then tell me what it is." She didn't, not fully, not honestly. And in that refusal, Ethan felt the last thread of hope loosen and fall away. He stood, gathering the folders calmly. "We'll continue this with counsel present," he said. "I'm done guessing." As he walked away, he felt grief, yes, but also relief. The waiting was over. The mystery had edges now. And whatever came next, it would unfold in daylight, not behind a deleted tag. Lena didn't follow him when he left the room. That more than anything she'd said, confirmed what Ethan already knew. If there had been innocence to defend, she would have chased him down the hallway, demanded to be heard, fought for her version of the truth. Instead, she stayed seated, letting silence do the work she no longer could. Ethan spent the night in the guest room, fully dressed, staring at the slow rotation of the ceiling fan. Every few minutes, he heard Lena move through the house opening drawers, pacing, stopping abruptly as if she were listening at his door. He wondered what version of him she imagined on the other side, angry, broken, begging. The irony didn't escape him, that the man she feared most now was the one who had finally stopped asking. By morning, the house felt like neutral territory claimed by neither of them. Lena had already left. New note. New message. Just the faint trace of her perfume lingering in the hallway, a ghost of intimacy that no longer belonged to him. Ethan didn't go to work. He sat at the dining table with Daniel Shore on speakerphone, folders spread neatly before him. Daniel confirmed what Ethan suspected. The drafts he'd found weren't harmless. They were contingency plans, legal scaffolding designed to move assets, assign blame, and accelerate separation on terms that would leave Ethan exposed and discredited. She was preparing an exit, Daniel said, and she wasn't planning to negotiate. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. How close was it? Close enough that timing mattered. Daniel replied, if you'd signed one more document without review, you'd be fighting uphill. After the call ended, Ethan felt something shift from defensive to strategic. This was no longer about uncovering a betrayal. That chapter was written. This was about preventing a theft of money, of reputation, of agency. Rena arrived in the afternoon, her presence calm and purposeful. She walked through the house with Ethan, noting security cameras, blind spots, shared devices. She asked questions Lena would never think to ask, the kind that revealed motive through omission. She assumed you'd react emotionally, Rena said later, seated across from him, that you'd confront her loudly, maybe threaten divorce. That gives her leverage. What she didn't plan for was restraint. Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. Restraint was never the plan. It just happened. Rena nodded. It often does, right before people regain control. By evening, Ethan had relocated the most sensitive documents to a secure location. He'd frozen accounts temporarily under advisement, leaving enough access to avoid suspicion, but not enough to do damage. He hated the deception, but he understood now that honesty without protection was just vulnerability. Lena returned late. She moved through the house quietly, as if unsure which version of him she'd encounter. When she finally spoke, it was from the doorway of the study. You really went to a lawyer, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Ethan replied, not looking up. She crossed her arms. You're overreacting. He met her gaze then, steady and unflinching. You planned for this. I found the drafts, the accounts, the overlap. Her expression hardened. You went through my things. I protected myself, he said, the way you should have protected us. For a moment, Lena looked almost amused. You think this makes you look strong? I don't care how it looks, Ethan said. I care what's true. She laughed then, a short, sharp sound. Truth is subjective, she said. I was unhappy. I found something that worked for me. You want to call that betrayal? Fine, but don't pretend you didn't benefit from my ambition while it suited you. The words stung, but they didn't destabilize him. He saw now how carefully she framed herself as the achiever, the provider, the one who had outgrown him. It was a narrative designed to justify anything that followed. You could have left, Ethan said quietly. You could have told me. And risk losing everything, she shot back. I don't think so. There it was. Not love. Not confusion. Calculation. Ethan nodded slowly. Then we're done talking without witnesses. He turned away, signaling the end of the conversation. Lena stared at him for a long moment, then scoffed and walked out, the door slamming behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. That night, Rena sent an update. Grant Hale had been spotted meeting with a financial intermediary earlier that day. The timing aligned too perfectly with Lena's return. They were accelerating. Ethan lay awake, not with fear, but with a sharpened awareness of the stakes. He thought about how easily his life could have been dismantled if he'd continued choosing comfort over curiosity, how close he'd come to signing away control simply because he trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. In the morning, Lena was gone again. A text waited on his phone. Staying with a friend. Don't contact me unless it's through lawyers. Ethan read it once, then archived it without reply. He spent the day preparing affidavits, documenting timelines, compiling evidence with Rena's guidance. Each step pulled him further out of the fog and into clarity. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was responding. By evening, Daniel called with news that tightened Ethan's grip on the phone. "We intercepted a filing attempt," he said. "Your safeguards worked, but they're moving fast now." Ethan looked out at the darkening sky, feeling the gravity of the moment settle in. "So am I," he said. He ended the call and stood in the quiet house, no longer haunted by silence. This wasn't the life he'd planned. It wasn't the ending he'd imagined, but it was real, and it was his again. And somewhere beyond the walls of that house, a story built on secrecy was starting to unravel thread by thread, under its own weight. Ethan learned quickly that waiting could be an action. The days after Lena moved out passed with an eerie stillness, as if the world were holding its breath. He kept to a routine morning runs, careful meals, methodical work with Rena, while the other half of his mind tracked movements he couldn't see. Strategy, Daniel had said. Patience, people rushing toward an outcome, often tripped over their own feet. Rena met him again by the river, choosing a bench where conversations dissolved into the sound of water. She slid a folder across his knee. Inside were timelines stitched together from fragments, security footage, timestamps, hotel keycard logs, meeting reservations under aliases that were thin enough to be insulting. Grant Hale's pattern emerged. First, short visits, quick exits, payments routed through intermediaries that left fingerprints no one noticed unless they knew where to look. Lena's pattern followed emails sent minutes after Grant's, calendar edits that erased overlaps, phone calls placed from places she claimed not to be. "They think they're invisible," Rena said. "That's usually when they're most visible." Ethan studied a screenshot of a message that stopped just short of explicit wrongdoing, its meaning clear only when placed beside three others. He felt the familiar pinch in his chest, the urge to ask why, to demand explanations that would never satisfy. He let it pass. That afternoon, Daniel called with a measured urgency. "They're shopping a narrative," he said. "If this turns adversarial, they'll try to frame you as unstable, preemptive." Ethan didn't bristle. He'd already anticipated it. He scheduled an appointment with a therapist. Not because he doubted himself, but because documentation mattered. He authorized character references from colleagues who knew his work and his temperament. He kept receipts, logs, a record of calm responses to provocation. He learned how easily the truth could be drowned out if it wasn't reinforced by structure. Lena reached out that evening through counsel, proposing a clean break. The offer was laced with urgency and concessions that looked generous until examined closely. Daniel flagged the traps with a red pen. Asset swaps that favored liquidity she could move, clauses that shifted liability, timelines that assumed Ethan would hurry. He didn't. Instead, he asked Rena to apply pressure where it would be felt, but not traced back to him. Nothing illegal, just light. A question posed here, a document requested there. Grant's meetings grew shorter, his calls lengthened. He began to cancel plans. Late one night, Ethan's phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Ethan," a man said, voice smooth and unfamiliar. "Grant Hale." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "You shouldn't be calling me." "On the contrary," Grant said. "I think it's time we cleared the air." "Through counsel," Ethan replied. Grant laughed softly. I admire your restraint, truly, but misunderstandings grow when people hide behind lawyers. Ethan pictured the marina, the easy laughter, the uncorrected title. You and I don't misunderstand each other, he said. We understand exactly enough. There was a pause, the smile fading on the other end. Careful, Grant said. People get hurt when pride takes over. Ethan felt the old heat rise, then settle. That's a threat, he said evenly. Don't do it again. He ended the call and sent a summary to Daniel and Rena, time-stamped and saved. The next morning brought movement. Rena texted a single line. They're scrambling. Grant had missed a meeting with a financier. A payment stalled. A document was pulled. Small fractures, but fractures nonetheless. Ethan focused on what he could control. He boxed up Lena's remaining things carefully, labeling each box, photographing contents, arranging a neutral handoff. He wasn't interested in punishment through chaos. He wanted the record to show restraint where others expected rage. In the quiet hours, he wrestled with grief that arrived in waves. The person he'd loved felt like a character he'd misread, lines delivered convincingly, until the final act revealed a different story. He mourned the future he'd imagined, the rituals that no longer had a place. He let himself feel it, then returned to the work. A week later, Rena arrived with news that sharpened the air between them. We have a third node, she said, Celia Bram. Ethan listened as Rena laid out the connections, Celia's role as a facilitator, the way funds flowed through her advisories before re-emerging, cleansed and renamed. The pattern wasn't proof yet, it was direction. They'll try to close before scrutiny, Rena said. If they do, mistakes multiply. That evening, Lena sent a message that read like a confession without admissions. I never meant for it to get this complicated. Ethan stared at it, recognizing the bid for sympathy, the attempt to reframe control as confusion. He didn't respond. Instead, he prepared for a meeting. Daniel scheduled mediation. On paper, in reality, a stage. He reviewed what he would say, and, more importantly, what he would not. He practiced silence. The day of the meeting arrived gray and slow. Lena entered with her attorney, posture composed, eyes scanning for weakness. Ethan met her gaze briefly, then looked away. Grant was not there, a choice that told its own story. When it was Ethan's turn, he spoke plainly. He acknowledged the end. He refused the timeline. He declined the asset shifts. He requested disclosures. Lena's attorney pushed back. Lena watched, jaw tight, as her leverage thinned under questions she hadn't prepared to answer. The room grew tense, then quiet. Afterward, as Ethan stepped into the hallway, his phone buzzed. A message from Rena. Grant's under review. Celia's accounts flagged. Ethan exhaled, slow and steady. The unraveling had begun, not with an explosion, but with threads loosening under light. He walked out into the afternoon, knowing the road ahead would be long, but for the first time since the night of the photo, he felt aligned with himself. Not vindicated, not victorious. Present, and presence, he was learning, was power. The pressure changed the weather of everything. Ethan felt it in the tone of emails, in the way lawyers asked for extensions, in the sudden friendliness of people who had once ignored him. When leverage shifts, manners follow. He didn't mistake courtesy for remorse. He treated it like fog, something that obscured edges and demanded slower steps. Rena's updates came in careful increments. Celia Bram's accounts hadn't collapsed, but they'd stalled, caught in a net of routine questions that took time to answer. Grant Hale's calendar thinned. Meetings moved from public spaces to private rooms. Silence, Rena said, was a tell. When people stop boasting, they're calculating, she told Ethan, over coffee that had long gone cold. Lena tried a different approach. She sent a message late one night that avoided the legal lanes entirely. I miss who we were before this turned into a war. Ethan read it without heat. He noticed what it didn't say. No apology. No acknowledgement of harm. just nostalgia wielded like a balm meant to soften resistance. He archived it. In therapy, Ethan spoke about the disorientation of realizing his memories weren't anchors anymore. The therapist didn't rush him toward forgiveness or closure. She asked him to name what he'd lost, then what he'd learned. Naming made the losses finite. Learning gave them shape. A week later, Daniel called with a clipped urgency that pulled Ethan back into the present. "They're attempting a filing through a different jurisdiction," he said. "It's aggressive. It's sloppy." Ethan closed his eyes. "Can we stop it?" "We can slow it," Daniel replied. "And slowing might be enough." Rena suggested a counter. Clean, lawful, inconvenient. Ethan approved it. He didn't relish obstruction, but he understood deterrence. If they wanted speed, he would insist on accuracy. The mediation reconvened under brighter lights. Lena looked composed, but Ethan noticed the tension in her hands, the way she aligned papers too carefully. When disclosures were requested again, this time broader, her attorney asked for time. Ethan said nothing. Silence, he'd learned, could be an answer. Afterward, as they crossed paths in the corridor, Lena spoke without preamble. "You're enjoying this?" Ethan met her eyes. "I'm protecting myself," she scoffed. "You could have trusted me." He didn't argue. Trust was no longer a topic, it was a consequence. That night, Rena sent a message that changed the calculus. Grant contacted a former partner. Panic move? Ethan asked what that meant. "It means he's shoring up alibis," she replied. "People do that when timelines don't line up." Ethan thought of the marina again. The ease of it. The way Grant had worn confidence like a tailored jacket, confidence frayed when threads were pulled from the lining. The next morning brought a surprise, a request for a meeting from Mara Quinn's attorney. Ethan felt a flicker of irritation, then curiosity. He agreed, on Daniel's terms. Mara arrived with a brittle smile and a stack of documents she claimed would set the record straight. Ethan listened as her attorney framed her as a bystander who'd been misled, as someone who posted a photo thoughtlessly and regretted it. Ethan asked a single question, voice calm. "Why did you text me the moment I arrived at the marina?" Mara's eyes darted. Her attorney interjected. Ethan waited. The pause stretched. Finally, Mara spoke. "I thought, if you saw them, you'd confront her. End it. I didn't think it would get like this." "Get like what?" Ethan asked. "Serious?" she said. Ethan nodded. "It was serious long before I saw anything." Daniel requested records, timestamps, messages. Mara's attorney promised cooperation. Outside, Daniel exhaled. "That was useful," he said. "Fear loosens tongues." By afternoon, the fog thickened. Grant's attorney requested a call. Ethan declined. He wasn't interested in narratives crafted under duress. He wanted facts under oath. That evening, Lena sent a message that felt different, shorter, sharper. "They're saying things about Grant, about money." Ethan recognized the pivot. When allies become liabilities, distance follows. He didn't reply. Rena's next update arrived after midnight. Celia's intermediary flagged a transfer. "We have a window." Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, heart steady. "What do you need from me?" he texted. "Nothing," Rena replied. "Just patience." Patience stretched the next days thin. Ethan kept routines, took notes, showed up. He answered emails with precision, refused calls politely. He learned how to live inside restraint without becoming numb. The break came quietly. A notice of inquiry, not charges questions. Enough to freeze movement, to make bankers cautious and lawyers verbose. Grant canceled another meeting. Lena's attorney requested another extension. Ethan felt the first real tremor of satisfaction. Not joy, not triumph, but confirmation. The truth didn't need theatrics. It advanced by increments. In therapy, Ethan spoke about the temptation to gloat. The therapist asked what gloating would give him. "Nothing," he admitted. "And it would take something away." On a gray afternoon, Ethan received a voicemail from Grant, short, controlled. "We should talk." Grant said. This has gone too far. Ethan deleted it without listening again. That night, he walked through the house, touching familiar edges, the banister, the doorframe, the table where so many dinners had ended in polite quiet. He didn't feel haunted anymore. The house felt honest, stripped of pretense. Before bed, he reviewed the file one last time. Dates aligned, names repeated, patterns held. The story, once scattered, now read as a whole. He turned off the light, knowing the next steps would be harder. Exposure, if it came, would wound people beyond himself. He didn't relish that. He accepted it. Truth, he was learning, wasn't a weapon to swing. It was a weight to set down carefully. So it didn't crush the wrong things on its way to the floor. The inquiry shifted everything from quiet maneuvering to visible consequence. Ethan felt it the way you feel. A storm changed direction, pressure dropping, air thickening. Phones rang that hadn't rung before. Emails arrived padded with politeness and hedged language. The machinery that had once moved smoothly began to grind, and with friction came heat. Lena showed up unannounced 2 days later. Ethan was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug. When he heard the front door open, he didn't turn right away. He dried his hands, set the towel down, and faced her, only after he'd composed himself. She stood just inside the doorway, posture straight, eyes scanning his face for cues he didn't offer. "We need to talk," she said. "Through counsel," Ethan replied. "This isn't legal," she insisted. "This is personal." He studied her, then really studied her. The confidence was still there, but it had a hairline crack. The composure looked practiced, like something worn for protection rather than ease. "Personal ended when you planned an exit without me," he said. "What do you want?" She took a breath. "They're asking questions about Grant, about money. People are getting nervous." Ethan waited. "They're dragging my name into it," she continued. "I didn't sign up for this." "You signed the emails," Ethan said quietly. "You booked the rooms. You asked me to sign documents without reading them." "That doesn't mean—" "It means responsibility," he interrupted, not raising his voice. "It means accountability." Her jaw tightened. "You think you're clean in this. You benefited from my work, from my connections." "I benefited from my marriage," Ethan said. "That's different." Silence filled the space. Lena glanced toward the hallway, toward rooms that had once felt like leverage. "We can make this go away," she said finally. "A settlement. Quiet. Fast." Ethan shook his head. "I won't trade truth for speed." Her eyes flashed. "You're doing this to punish me." "I'm doing this to stop you," he replied. "From hurting me again. From hurting others." She laughed then, sharp and brittle. "You always needed to be right." "No," Ethan said. "I needed to be safe." She stared at him, searching for the man who used to bend first. When she didn't find him, something hardened. "Fine," she said. "Then we'll let it play out." She left without another word, the door closing softly behind her. Ethan stood still, letting the echo settle. He didn't feel victorious. He felt resolved. That afternoon, Daniel confirmed what Ethan suspected. The inquiry had teeth, not enough to bite yet, but enough to draw blood if mishandled. "They'll posture," Daniel said. "They'll try to move assets, rewrite timelines. Let them. Every move leaves a mark." Rena's messages came in bursts. A canceled transfer here, a hurried meeting there. Celia Bram had gone quiet. Never a good sign. Grant Hale's attorney requested an off-the-record conversation. Denied. Ethan learned how power reacted to resistance. It didn't retreat. It tested. Ethan focused on his own house. He boxed the last of Lena's things, arranged a neutral pickup through counsel, and documented the handoff. He didn't rush it. Rushing was how mistakes happened. At night, the dreams returned, but they'd changed. No longer water rising or doors closing. Now he dreamed of standing in a room while people argued behind a glass wall. He couldn't hear them, but he could see their mouths moving too fast, their hands gesturing too much. When he woke, his heart was calm, The next escalation came from an unexpected direction. A reporter called, asking questions framed as curiosity. Ethan declined comment and forwarded the inquiry to Daniel. The story was trying to surface, and Ethan understood the risk. Exposure could correct the record or distort it beyond recognition. Daniel recommended preemptive documentation, affidavits, chronologies. Ethan complied. He didn't embellish. He didn't editorialize. He stuck to dates and facts, trusting the weight of consistency. A week later, the mediator requested another session. Lena arrived late, eyes ringed with fatigue. She didn't bother to hide. Her attorney spoke first, proposing compromises that looked conciliatory until the fine print revealed the same asymmetries. Ethan declined them all. When it was his turn, he spoke simply. He wanted disclosures completed. He wanted assets frozen until review. He wanted timelines honored. He wanted distance, Lena interjected. You're dragging this out. Ethan met her gaze. You dragged me into it. The room fell quiet. The mediator nodded, notes scribbling. Outside, as they parted, Lena hissed. Grant won't forgive this. Ethan paused. Neither will I, he said. But forgiveness isn't the goal. That night, Rena sent a message with a single attachment, a time-stamped exchange that connected Celia's advisory directly to Grant's entity, routed through a shell with a name that appeared nowhere in the official filings. Not proof yet. Direction. Ethan forwarded it to Daniel and shut the laptop. He went for a long walk, the city humming around him. He passed couples arguing softly, friends laughing loudly, strangers moving past without consequence. He felt a pang, not envy, but recognition. Life continued. It always did. When he returned home, his phone buzzed with a message from Lena that he didn't read. He powered it off instead and sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, breathing steady. He thought about the man he'd been before the Marina photo, the one who believed stability was the same as safety. He thought about how easily trust could be mistaken for surrender. He didn't regret loving her. He regretted ignoring himself. The inquiry widened 2 days later. A formal request for records. Banks complied. Calendars were subpoenaed. The machinery turned, slow but undeniable. Grant Hale canceled a speaking engagement. Celia Bram's firm issued a statement that said nothing. Ethan felt the truth, gathering mass, the way snow does before it slides. He didn't celebrate. He prepared, because when the slide came, it would take more than the guilty with it. It would expose systems that thrived on silence and people who mistook cleverness for invincibility. Ethan knew the impact would ripple outward, touching lives he would never know. He accepted that weight, and in accepting it, he understood something essential. This wasn't about winning. It was about ending a story built on erasure and starting one that could stand in the open. The story went public without ever using Ethan's name. It began as a brief, cautious article tucked beneath the fold, questions raised, sources anonymous, phrases like alleged and under review, repeating like safety rails. Ethan read it at his kitchen table, coffee cooling beside him, feeling the peculiar distance of recognition without exposure. He wasn't the subject, he was the context. And context, he knew now, could be just as powerful. Phones rang across the city that morning. Ethan didn't answer his. Daniel did. Rena did. The machinery that had hummed quietly was now audible, metal on metal. Grant Hale's name appeared with qualifiers. Celia Bram's firm issued a longer statement that said very little. Lena's company circulated an internal memo emphasizing cooperation. Cooperation always sounded voluntary until it wasn't. Lena called that afternoon. Ethan let it ring twice before answering. He kept his voice even. This needs to go through counsel. I just need to hear your voice, she said, breathless. They're tearing this apart. They're asking questions, Ethan replied. That's different, she laughed weakly. You always did that, split hairs. I learned to, he said. When words stop meaning what they say. There was a long pause. Did you talk to the press? No. Then why does it feel like you did? Ethan closed his eyes. Because the truth doesn't need an interview. She swallowed. Grant says this will blow over. Grant says a lot of things, Ethan said. He said I wouldn't notice. Her breath caught. For a moment, the mask slipped. I didn't mean for you to get hurt. I know, Ethan said. And he did. Understood the logic, not the love. You meant for me to stay quiet. Silence stretched, brittle. What do you want? She asked finally. Ethan considered the question. Disclosures completed. Distance maintained. No more surprises. You're enjoying being in control, she said. He didn't take the bait. I'm enjoying not being controlled. The call ended without ceremony. That evening, Ethan met Daniel to review the latest filings. Subpoenas were moving. Records requested. The strategy had shifted from containment to compliance. They'll posture publicly and negotiate privately, Daniel said. Expect outreach. Outreach came quickly. An intermediary requested a conversation to explore resolution. Ethan declined. Another suggested a framework that assumed urgency. Ethan declined again. He learned the value of repetition through counsel and how refusal could be firm without being loud. Rena sent updates in steady intervals. Grant had canceled another appearance. Celia's firm hired outside counsel known for damage control. The shell entity had been identified by two separate banks. Independently, patterns converged. In the quiet hours, Ethan felt the cost. He missed the simplicity of believing what he was told. He missed the version of himself who didn't scan rooms for exits or weigh every message for intent. In therapy, he named the fatigue and learned to set it down rather than carry it everywhere. You don't have to be vigilant all the time, the therapist said. Just when it matters. It mattered again on a rainy Thursday when Lena arrived with her attorney for a scheduled exchange of documents. Ethan waited in the conference room, hands folded, the window streaked with water behind him. Lena looked smaller than he remembered, not diminished, just human. The armor set aside for practicality. They spoke through lawyers, numbers, dates, signatures. When the meeting ended, Lena lingered. Can we talk? She asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. The attorney stepped out. I didn't think it would end like this, she said. He studied her face, searching for the person he'd loved. He found fragments, rearranged. I didn't think it would begin like that, he said. She looked down. I felt invisible, she said. And then I didn't. Ethan softened, but only enough to listen. You didn't have to erase me to feel seen, she flinched. I didn't erase you. You planned to, he replied gently. That's the part I can't carry. Tears welled, surprising them both. Is there any way back? She asked. Ethan shook his head. Sadness and certainty coexisting. Back to what? The story we told ourselves, or the one that was happening without me. She wiped her eyes, nodded once, and stood. I hope you're happy, she said, not bitterly. I hope you're honest, he replied. After she left, Ethan sat alone for a while, letting the rain quiet his thoughts. He didn't feel triumph. He felt release, the kind that arrives when you stop arguing with reality. The next wave came harder. A second article, more names, fewer qualifiers. Grant Hale's attorney issued a denial that contradicted a document already on record. Celia Bram's firm announced a temporary restructuring. Lena's company placed her on leave. Ethan received a message from Claire. Proud of you, he replied with a simple heart. Grant called again. Ethan didn't answer. Grant texted. This didn't have to happen. Ethan typed. Erased, then sent. It did. In the days that followed, Ethan's life grew quieter. Fewer calls, longer walks. He returned to work with a focus that surprised his colleagues. He slept better. He cooked meals that tasted like something. Rena's final update that week was brief. They're cooperating. Ethan understood what that meant. The slide had begun. Not an avalanche. Something slower, more surgical. Consequences calibrated to evidence. On Sunday morning, Ethan stood by the window with a mug of tea, watching the city wake. He felt the weight of it all. What had been lost, what had been prevented, what would never be the same. He didn't romanticize the outcome. He respected it. He knew there would be more meetings, more documents, more waiting. Healing, like truth, moved at a human pace. But he also knew this. The worst night had passed. The story no longer lived in shadows. And whatever remained would be faced with eyes open, voice steady, and a self he trusted again. The next phase arrived without warning, the way consequences often do quietly. Then, all at once, Ethan learned about it from Daniel, who called early with a voice sharpened by urgency. "There's movement," he said. "Formal interviews. Requests for sworn statements. This is where stories harden into records." Ethan listened, pen poised over a legal pad he no longer needed. He'd learned the rhythms by now. When systems began to speak in affidavits, people stopped improvising. He agreed to the schedule, asked what to bring, and hung up feeling the peculiar calm that comes from preparation meeting reality. Rena met him later that morning to review boundaries. "Say what you know, don't speculate, don't soften," she said. "Silence, where you're unsure, is strength, not weakness." Ethan nodded. He wasn't tempted to embellish. The truth had done enough work already. The interview room was smaller than he expected. Neutral. A table, a recorder, a woman with kind eyes who asked precise questions and wrote quickly. Ethan answered steadily, anchoring each response to dates, documents, messages. He described the marina without dramatizing it, the staff title without indignation. He explained the drafts he'd found, the requests to sign, the timing. When asked how it made him feel, he paused not because he was overwhelmed, but because he understood the difference between relevance and relief. "It made me cautious," he said finally, "and careful." Afterward, he stepped outside into a sky that had decided on rain. He didn't rush to his car. He let the damp settle on his jacket, grounding him. The interview hadn't been cathartic. It had been clarifying. That was enough. Lena's attorney requested a brief meeting that afternoon, framed as alignment. Ethan agreed on one condition: everything on the record. Lena arrived with her composure reassembled. But the seams showed. She didn't look at him until they sat. Her attorney spoke first, proposing cooperation in exchange for expedited separation terms. Ethan listened, then asked a single question. "What disclosures are you offering?" The attorney outlined them. Ethan waited until the end. "All of them," he said, "or none." Lena's attorney hesitated. Lena didn't. "All," she said. The word fell heavy, irrevocable. After the meeting, Lena lingered again. This time, without asking, "I didn't think it would get this far," she said quietly. Ethan kept his voice even. "It didn't have to." She nodded, eyes glossy. "Grant promised." "Stop," Ethan said gently. "Don't put his voice in my mouth." She swallowed. "I don't know who I am without all of this." "That's not my work anymore," he replied. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Rena's updates grew more technical. Document requests expanded. Cross-references appeared. Celia Bram's advisory connections mapped cleanly onto timelines that no longer looked accidental. Grant Hale's counsel requested continuances that weren't granted. The language shifted from denial to context, from certainty to mitigation. Ethan's life narrowed to essentials. He ran in the mornings, worked during the day, attended meetings when required. He cooked simple dinners and slept without dreaming. The noise receded. In its place, something steadier took root. One evening, Claire came by with takeout and quiet company. They ate at the kitchen table, the house warmer with another presence. "You're different," she said. "Better or worse?" Ethan asked. "Clearer," she replied. He smiled. It felt accurate. The twist came the following week in the form of an unexpected disclosure. Daniel called. Voice measured but charged. "They've produced a draft we hadn't seen," he said. "Earlier than the others. It changes the timeline." Ethan felt a flicker of heat. "Earlier how?" "Before the marina," Daniel said. "Before the first extension." Rena arrived an hour later with the document It was a preliminary plan, dates penciled in, contingencies noted, not binding, not executed, but unmistakably intentional. Ethan stared at it, the air thinning. This wasn't a reaction to opportunity. It was a blueprint. They'll say it was hypothetical, Rena said. It wasn't, Ethan replied. It was practice. The impact rippled quickly. Interviews resumed. Questions sharpened. Grant's counsel adjusted tone again, now arguing scope rather than substance. Celia Bram's firm announced an internal review with external oversight. Lena's company confirmed her leave would be indefinite. Ethan received a message from Lena late that night. I'm sorry. 2 words. No caveats, no asks. He read it twice, then replied with one of his own, I believe you. He didn't add anything else. Belief didn't require reconciliation. The next morning brought another interview, this one shorter. The investigator asked if Ethan had anything to add. He considered the question, then shook his head. Everything important is already there, he said. It was true. When he left, the rain had lifted. The city looked rinsed, edges sharper. Ethan walked for a while, phone silent, steps unhurried. He felt the paradox of relief without celebration. Justice, when it comes, often arrives, stripped of ceremony. That afternoon, Daniel confirmed what Ethan had sensed. They're negotiating outcomes now, he said. Not innocence. Ethan closed his eyes, breathing out. What do you need from me? Consistency, Daniel replied. And patience. He had both. As evening settled, Ethan returned home and opened the study window. Letting cool air circulate, he placed the folders back in the cabinet. Not locked, not hidden. He didn't need them close anymore. The truth had moved beyond his keeping. He sat at the desk and wrote a single page. Not a statement, not a letter to Lena, but a note to himself. Dates of resolve, boundaries learned, promises made. He folded it and placed it in a drawer, a marker of where the ground had shifted. The story wasn't over. Consequences would continue to unfurl, measured and public. There would be headlines he didn't read, and arguments he didn't hear. But the center of it, the place where his life intersected with the truth, had stabilized. Ethan turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment. Listening to the house settle, he felt no urge to check his phone, no need to rehearse. Whatever came next would come in daylight, and he was ready for it. The daylight arrived heavier than Ethan expected. Not oppressive, just full. Like a room after furniture had been moved back into place. Consequences, once abstract, were now procedural, calendars filled with dates that mattered. Words were chosen with care because they would live beyond the moment they were spoken. Grant Hale's name surfaced again, this time in a context that stripped away polish. An inquiry expanded into a formal action. Cooperation shifted from voluntary to required. Daniel called with updates that sounded less like strategy and more like inventory. They're narrowing the scope, he said, which means they're confident about what they've found. Ethan thanked him and ended the call, feeling a steadying calm. Narrowing meant focus. Focus meant endings. Lena reached out through counsel with a request that surprised him. A private conversation, recorded, with a mediator present. Ethan agreed, not out of nostalgia, but out of respect for process. If words were going to be said, they would be said cleanly. They met in a neutral room, with windows that didn't open. The mediator set ground rules and then went quiet. Lena spoke first, voice measured, hands folded too neatly in her lap. I want to acknowledge harm, she said. Without qualifiers, Ethan listened, his attention anchored to what she said and what she didn't. She spoke of ambition, outpacing intimacy, of choices rationalized as temporary, that became permanent by repetition. She did not blame him. She did not ask for forgiveness. When it was Ethan's turn, he chose restraint. I accept the acknowledgement, he said. I don't accept the rewrite. She flinched, then nodded. Fair. They covered logistics, disclosures, timelines. The mediator summarized. They signed. The meeting ended without ceremony. When Lena stood to leave, she paused. I hope you find something simple, she said. Ethan met her gaze. I hope you find something honest. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. He walked a few blocks before calling Rena. She answered with a single word. Confirmed. Which part? Ethan asked. All of it, she said. Grant's counsel conceded scope. Celia's intermediary cut ties. The blueprint document did what it needed to do. Ethan felt the knot in his chest loosen a fraction, not release alignment. He thanked her and hung up. The next days brought clarity dressed as paperwork. Notices arrived. Statements were issued. A timeline published by a third party mirrored the one Ethan had built in private. Consistency did its work. Lena's company announced leadership changes. Celia Bram's firm suspended operations pending review. Grant Hale stepped back from public roles, citing personal matters. Ethan didn't read the comments. He didn't search his name. He focused on his mornings, his work, the ordinary dignity of living without vigilance. He returned to the gym, to dinners with friends, who asked careful questions and accepted careful answers. He found himself laughing, surprised by it. One afternoon, a reporter emailed requesting a quote. Ethan declined politely. He'd learned that visibility wasn't the same as voice. He didn't need to narrate what the record already said. A twist arrived quietly. As most truths do, Daniel called with a tone that suggested caution rather than alarm. Grant's team is floating a narrative, he said. Not denial. Diminishment. Meaning? Ethan asked. Meaning they'll frame Lena as the primary actor. It's a pivot. Ethan closed his eyes. He'd anticipated it. What's our response? None, Daniel said. The documents speak. Let the pivot be seen. That night, Lena sent a message through counsel that felt less guarded. They're trying to put this on me. Ethan read it and sat with the weight of it. The impulse to comfort rose and passed. He replied once, Tell the truth. It's the only thing that won't move under you. She didn't respond. The hearing came faster than expected. Not a spectacle, just a room, a record, a set of questions asked and answered. Ethan attended when required and waited when not. He watched professionals do their work. He learned how systems corrected themselves slowly, imperfectly, but decisively, when evidence stacked without contradiction. Afterward, he walked along the river with Claire, the air cool and clean. Do you feel done? She asked. I feel finished with the waiting, Ethan said, not with the living. He noticed how the water moved around stones, not fighting them, not yielding entirely. He understood the metaphor without needing to articulate it. The final confirmation arrived in an email. Daniel forwarded without commentary. Findings, recommendations, next steps. The language was careful and conclusive. Ethan read it once, then closed the laptop. He didn't need to reread it to believe it. Later, alone in the house, he opened the drawer where he'd placed the note to himself. He added a line at the bottom, choose presence over proof. He folded it again and returned it to the drawer. A message buzzed on his phone, Lena. One last time. Not through counsel. I told them everything. Ethan stared at it, then typed a reply that surprised him with its simplicity. Thank you. He didn't know if she would ever find peace. He knew he was finding his. That night, he slept deeply, dreamless. In the morning, the city woke as it always did, indifferent and alive. Ethan made coffee and opened the window, letting the day in. He didn't scan for threats. He didn't check for updates. The story had reached a place where it could no longer be steered by secrecy. What remained would unfold in public time. Measured and accountable, Ethan stepped into the light, carrying nothing he hadn't chosen, ready for whatever ordinary miracle came next. The reckoning arrived not with sirens or shouting, but with calendars cleared and doors closed. Ethan learned that justice, when it finally takes form, often prefers conference rooms to courtrooms, signatures to speeches. The process moved forward with a deliberate gravity that left little room for drama and even less for denial. Grant Hale did not appear at the final session. His absence spoke louder than any statement. Counsel cited scheduling conflicts, then health concerns, then ongoing discussions. None of it mattered. The record was complete. The blueprint document, once hypothetical, then inconvenient now, sat at the center of the table, its penciled contingencies echoed by executed actions that followed the same arc. Patterns had names now. Names had consequences. Ethan attended when requested, answered when asked, and otherwise stayed out of the way. He watched professionals do what professionals do when the facts stop moving. The room felt strangely quiet, as if the air itself had decided to cooperate. When the findings were summarized, there was no triumph in the language, only precision. Responsibility allocated, remediation required, oversight imposed. Outside, Ethan stood with Daniel in the corridor, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Daniel closed his folder and met Ethan's eyes. "This is as clean as it gets," he said. "No appeals on substance, just timelines." Ethan nodded. He felt lighter than he expected, not because the outcome was satisfying, but because it was finished. The waiting, the long, corrosive waiting, had ended. Later that afternoon, Lena asked for one last meeting. Again mediated. Again recorded. Ethan agreed. They sat across from each other at a small table. The mediator present but silent. Lena looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Her ambition had been stripped of momentum. What remained was a person forced to stand still. "I won't contest the findings," she said. "I've agreed to the terms." Ethan listened, hands folded. He noticed how her voice no longer reached for leverage. It simply stated, "They're asking me to step away completely," she continued. "From everything. That's the consequence," Ethan said. "Not unkindly." She nodded. "I'm not asking you to fix this." "Good," he replied. "I can't," she exhaled. "I want you to know I didn't expect you to survive this intact." Ethan met her gaze. "Neither did I." They spoke briefly about logistics. The mediator summarized. They signed. When it ended, Lena hesitated, then extended her hand. Ethan took it, the contact brief and neutral. "I hope you build something real," she said. Ethan released her hand. "I already am." The separation finalized quietly. Boxes were moved, accounts settled, names removed. The house changed again, not emptier, but clearer. Like a room after unnecessary furniture is gone. Ethan rearranged nothing at first. He let the space settle into its own shape. The public aftermath unfolded in measured waves. Grant Hale resigned from remaining roles and entered into a compliance agreement that read like a confession without the word. Celia Bram's firm dissolved under supervision, its assets frozen pending review. Lena's company announced reforms with language that emphasized lessons learned. Ethan read none of the commentary. He didn't need strangers to tell him what had happened. Rena sent a final message. "It's done." No flourish, no emojis, just closure. Ethan replied with a single word, "Thank you." In the days that followed, Ethan discovered how quiet could feel when it wasn't braced against threat. He returned to routines that had once been placeholders, morning runs, late dinners, and weekend errands, and found them newly substantial. He noticed how often he smiled without checking himself. He slept without rehearsing. One evening, Claire came by with a bottle of wine and an easy laugh. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, the city softening at the edges. "You look like you," she said. "I feel like me," Ethan replied. He meant it. A message arrived on his phone while they talked, an email from the investigator, confirming closure on his side. Ethan read it, then set the phone down without comment. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Good news. Final news," he said. Later, alone, Ethan walked through the house, touching familiar edges with a different kind of attention. The banister no longer felt like a witness. The table no longer held tension. He opened the study window and let the night air in, carrying the city's distant sounds. He didn't feel compelled to capture the moment. Presence was enough. He thought about the first night, the kitchen, the photo, the tag that didn't belong. How easily life could fracture on a detail. How hard it was to rebuild without pretending it hadn't. He understood now. that healing wasn't the erasure of damage, it was the refusal to let damage define the future. Ethan packed the last folder into a box labeled Archive and placed it on a high shelf, not hidden, not displayed, simply stored, like a map you no longer need, but respect enough not to burn. As he turned off the lights, his phone buzzed one last time. A short message from Lena. Not through counsel, not asking for anything. I'm stepping away. For real, Ethan read it, then replied with care. Take care. He set the phone down and went to bed. Sleep came easily, deep and unbroken. In the morning, the city woke with its ordinary insistence. Ethan made coffee, opened the window, and stood in the light. The story had reached its end, not with applause, but with accountability. The kind that holds, the kind that frees. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't arrive screaming. Sometimes it whispers, hides behind routine, and asks you to doubt yourself instead of the truth. Ethan's story reminds us that the most dangerous lies are the ones built slowly, layered with trust, convenience, and silence. But it also shows something more powerful. Clarity doesn't come from confrontation alone. It comes from courage, the courage to pause, to observe, to protect yourself before reacting. Healing isn't about winning or watching others fall. It's about reclaiming your voice when it was quietly taken from you. It's about learning that love without honesty isn't love. It's a negotiation you never agreed to. And walking away from deception isn't weakness. It's the first step toward dignity. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share your thoughts. In the comments, where are you watching from, and what part of this journey hit closest to home? And if you're drawn to stories about truth, resilience, and finding strength after betrayal, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories that matter.